So we're delighted to be joined today by two of the people behind this to discuss it. We've got producer Jessie Fisk. You're very welcome, Jessie.
Thanks, Gar. Very happy to be here.
And we're delighted to be joined from Italy by director Carlo Lavagna. You're very welcome, Carlo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you. Carlo, I'm just going to jump straight in and talk to you about the genesis of Shadows, I suppose. How did the script come your way? Was it brought to you by the producers? And I suppose my first question would be like, how did you react to the script? What was it that attracted you to the story?
So when I got the script, it was a very simple film in a sense that it was a genre film. It was slightly more horror than it ended up being. But I read immediately something that resonated and then kind of like touched me, and it was how to portray an inner world, like inner problems into like a film that actually is a genre film. Okay. So this has been done many times in thrillers and psychological thrillers especially, but I got really intrigued by the fact that I could show like fears and traumas in an explicit way by hiding all these other layers behind the movie. That was my what triggered me and what my interest was on the script. So I got the script, basically started working on the script to make it mine. The script was written by 4 screenwriters throughout different stages, and I tried to adapt to my sensibility and my style and my aesthetics, and that's how it started, basically.
It's interesting you say you adapted to your style and aesthetics, because there's something in it that really kind of chimed with me with like your previous film, Ariana, that again, there's this thing about, suppose, people discovering identity or who they really are as well, kind of through it. Would that have been something you'd have seen in it, or like that you would have brought to it yourself?
But since like identity is something that I like and I'm interested in as a subject, and I did it with Ariana, I thought that I could have done the same thing but with a different approach and with a different genre and style. So I had fun. Basically, what I tried to do is like to give the film the touch it has, because anyway, for some reason, when I read the script, it reminded me of some older films and some horror films and psychological thrillers from the 70s, the early 80s. And maybe it's because I grew up around the time that I kind of like brought in the movie that aesthetic, because anyway, you're attached to something that stays with you and try to replicate it no matter how or what in the movies you make. And it's fun also to change, so you don't have to just like do it all the time. But in that film, I said like, okay, why not to bring that kind of aesthetic? And I don't know, for some reason, I liked, you see there's scaffoldings in the films. That's an idea, but very simple. It doesn't say anything about it, or in particular, other than the girls having a hiding spot, on top of that thing. But the scaffoldings, it brought me back to, to Centre Pompidou. I don't know, to like the aesthetics of the 70s, or like things I've seen in the movies. I say like, okay, I'd like to put that in there. And it's really like unwanted. What I'm saying is that my approach was like, as the movie is about something hidden and it's about a discovery of a girl that is creating her proper defense to survive a very hard, environment. I just like let my subconscious go out and say like, okay, I think this fits with that, and without even, too much thinking about it.
I think that's a healthy way to do it. You can overthink these things and over-explain certainly as well. Yeah. I'm curious, what films, like you mentioned horror films and psychological thrillers from the 70s and 80s influenced you? Because I've seen a good few kind of genre films this year as part of our submission process, and they're very strong, but what strikes me is that they're not genre for genre's sake. They all have kind of something behind them. Like You're Not My Mother, for example, dealt with a child's fear of their mother who may or may not be mentally ill. We've kind of another one, Gateway. It's about grief, really, but it's a horror film as well. And I love that this kind of film, while being essentially a post-apocalyptic film to an extent, starting off, it's about something, and it's about that relationship with the people. I'm just wondering, is there any particular 70s or 80s films you mentioned that kind of would have.
No, because in the 70s and 80s, they tend to like, now it's more like straightforward. I think the genre or the things are like, they say what they say, and maybe before people tend to like give films, different layers. Not that it doesn't happen anymore today, but like when you make a genre, like I think that the approach also of to make this movie at the beginning, and I don't know if it was also Jessie's vision, but I think like certainly for the Italian co-producers, that was a way to make something appealing to the public. Granted that then it was a pandemic, and so it was a total mess. But the idea was like, okay, let's make a genre because that's what works now. But for me, I said like, okay, looking at movies, but movies that are not related. Okay, I can mention Don't Look Now. Obviously, it's a movie that we can refer ideally. Some movies from Italian directors like Marco Ferreri, for instance, that have this like kind of weird, touched, like strange feelings to it, almost like, especially the post-apocalyptic films he did. That kind of vibe. But I just describe it as a vibe and as approach of shooting, of filming things that then talks throughout the film. Besides the story, that's what kind of like the atmosphere you're in. That's what I was trying to give, to refer.
That's something that's very strong in the film, is that it does keep a very specific tone. That might be quite hard to maintain in some films, but I think you do a remarkable job with the inside and the outside being almost like completely separate, a lot of dark and only 3 characters, but you do maintain like an awful lot of tension throughout. Can I just ask you, was this always meant to be like an English language project when you came into it first for like an international market, or did that come about as part of the co-production process?
No, I think, when it came to me, it was already like set up as an international English spoken film. So, and that was one of the reasons also, like I enjoyed doing it and I accepted, because it was fun. I said like, okay, why not make an English, spoken language film? And yeah, so it was meant to be like, and it happened before and it's happening more. If you think about it now, it's like you have both scenarios, because on one hand, you have people accepting more, especially if you think about North America, people are reading a little bit more subtitles than before, and you have films that can win Oscars even if they're in the original language. But on the other hand, there are films made by local markets such as Italy, for instance. In this case, it was a co-production. It totally made sense because it was like an Irish Italian co-production. So to make it in English, to set it there, etc. But that, if you think about it, it happened before, and the funny thing, the only difference I see, just because you mentioned that we were talking about the 70s, the only difference really that happened is like that now we record sound and we don't dub any longer, because like that also gives less freedom, like in my opinion, to directors, because like before you had Sergio Leone or you had whoever, like even Fellini, using whoever they wanted as actors. They didn't mind, like I think Robert De Niro completely dubbed in Italian, but they did like masterpieces, not caring. And the films were like redubbed in English or whatever language, and they worked. And also like this dubbing thing gives like the films like this detachment, that it's kind of like a dreamy feeling, that it is what I like about cinema. So either, I don't know, now it's kind of sketchy. I think that we should go back to dubbing, or to some extent, because like you never have any more like Burt Lancaster playing a Sicilian noble, okay, like in Visconti, it's not gonna happen. So it's a pity.
I take your point there, and I'm glad you mentioned Sergio Leone, because that was one of my questions about how you can get this. You kind of reinvented the Western by bringing this whole new European sensibility to it. That was so needed, and I think you end up with this weird kind of almost dreamlike, to me at least, something different between 2 different cultures coming together. But I'm not sure I'd agree with you on the bringing back dubbing thing. I think I've heard a lot of really bad Irish accents on that, Carlo. Jessie, how did yourself and Natalie through Feline Films and Jane Doolan get involved? How did this come your way as a co-production?
So I set up the company with Nat we kind of started in 2017, officially set it up in 2018, and kind of almost immediately were put in contact with Ashend Films, who are the majority producer in Italy. They're part of the Grolandia group over there, a pretty big company, and that came through, surprise, surprise, a friend of Natalie being Italian, and we just kind of discussed it, and it was like, they're very aware of this now, and it was something we joke about frequently, but it was a real fake it till you make it scenario, because they were kind of like, you know, who is this company? Are they going to be the right people for the film? And they'd met us and they liked us, and that was enough. And then we brought them over to Dublin, and we were just kind of, you know, really trying to put on the show of how we can put this together in the most professional way, which we really did. We just, you know, pretended we had a fancy office we didn't have. It was nothing too major. And we got support from location. You can get a small support for location scouting and stuff to get a really good location scout to show people around, and we did all that, and it kind of worked. And I think the personalities worked really well. Ines, who was leading on their side of things, you know, we all just kind of hit it off and had a very shared sensibility for the film. And I think that she really liked, she is kind of one of the only female lead producers working in that company at the time, and as a big company, so she was like really happy to be working with a female-led team. And we loved the project because it just, again, it had this real, there was just something so grounded in it that felt right, what we wanted to do in terms of starting with a film that was going to be very much European sensibility, you know, had really real sort of, I suppose, theatrical driven nuances throughout, and it just made sense for us as well, being Feline Films, wanting to work with a lot of women, and that, I think, was enough of a tie for us to then want to work together to move through the next steps. So we just said, look, I think you should make the film here, because that was something that was a big selling point for us. Whether you get official co-production money or not, you can access the tax credit. It's one of the beautiful things about having the tax credit in Ireland. And I think they just loved the partnership so much that it worked, that they were like, okay, let's give it a go. We found great locations, which is actually another brilliant story about what we were looking for and what we ended up with in the production process. And I believe what was a really good tie-in for working together was the casting process. I think they really believed in kind of our taste and the people we were working with for casting, and that was a huge thing because it was their first English language film. So they put a lot of trust in us to deliver the right way. So I think all in all is a really kind of happy co-production marriage throughout. And you know, it's an interesting one for Irish producers. I think it happens more frequently where production, you'd be the minority co-producer, but it was shoot in Ireland. And it can be difficult because it's, you know, you're a smaller partner to the overall picture, but yet you're still running like a really key part of it. Yeah. So that is always tricky. Obviously, it was just a project that we were so happy to be involved with, and we're so fond of the people. So it worked really well for us in that moment as well. We started a company.
It's interesting, like, so this was your first co-production, am I right? Was shooting, yeah. And like,
well, as a company,
I do think that's like a great piece of advice for any up-and-coming producers, is fake it till you make it. That's essentially like the job starting off, from what I can work out from people, is just like, and like you did a fantastic job for your first co-production. You mentioned the casting process, which I would like to talk to then. This is kind of to both of you, I suppose, but so much of the script, I imagine, rests, like, it is all just these three characters really, and like casting must be hugely like vital. It's vital to every production, but especially to something like this. So Jessie, before we go back to Carlo, maybe you can tell me like a bit about the casting process, or how, like, once you've read like Alma, Alex, and the woman character, or the mother, what were your initial thoughts on that, and how did you go about the casting process?
Well, what's interesting is initially they were male and female.
Oh.
The first draft of the script that I read, yeah. And that changed over time. The more kind of casting we did, the more we kind of moved into this space of, why does this need to be this way? And let's really think about what actually is going to work best. I think it's something that Carlo brought in as well, in terms of his sensibility and this kind of emotional tie between these three characters. And I believe most people have seen the film. Are we allowed spoilers, or do we avoid
You can,
spoilers?
but you're going to give a warning.
There's a spoiler coming. Ding ding ding. Is you know, the idea that one of the characters is actually a projection of somebody's imagination, and how that kind of ties into it, and what is the world this person knows before, you know. So I think that was key, but the process was great. It was a long process with the wonderful Amy Rowan, and we just found so many. That's the beauty of when you actually have the freedom of funding, in a sense. Like, there's not huge amount of market money. There's market money coming from Italian broadcast, but there is a certain freedom in street casting and finding new talent, and seeing, you know, a little bit more in the room sort of space, which was really exciting. Now, obviously, in the end, Lola was, I think, was just right at the cusp. We were so lucky that that she was available to do the film. But
was Lola the first person you locked in, or?
Well, interestingly, Lola and Mia auditioned on the same day, but they were auditioning for reverse roles. So it was kind of at the time where we were, for Lola's role, was kind of being very open with, like, there was no sort of gender specifics on who we were looking for to play the role. And when Lola came in, they were just so fantastic, and we had them come in reading the roles that they were supposed to, and then Mia went off. She actually flew in for it, and Lola was outside, and we just kind of called them both back in really quickly and asked them to do the other way around, and it kind of was a moment where everything just clicked into space. So it was a really, really nice thing, and I think they became super close from that. I think they just both felt really safe with each other, and it was Mia's first feature, and it was a big deal for her to kind of put that trust in us as well, I think. So I think that combo really, really is something that strengthens any film, is when your actors have a good, solid working relationship, and sometimes even better if there's a friendship there, because it can kind of
Carlo, for you on that, and that's really interesting because they have incredible sisterly chemistry on screen. Like, is that something you kind of spotted when they came in first, and then when they came back, was that there from the start, or did you end up having to do some kind of like chemistry tests or rehearsal with them or anything?
No, I did rehearsals. So when like, as you know, no, we just spoke about it, but like when we finally understood that, you know, what the roles, you know, had to be, and how it worked out, you know, well between them, because it was the first feature film for Mia. I thought it would be, you know, it would have been nice to spend some time together, the two of them, in first just like rehearsing, reading the script, and then spending time at the hotel. We were lucky enough that the hotel was not far from where we were. We could, you know, spend time before. So I remember afternoons, you know, the three of us going there and rehearsing the scenes. We did pretty much all the film, all the possible scene, at least the ones in the hotel, together before we actually shot the film. And I think that also helped them to feel. I think the major thing is for me was to, you know, Lola was way more experienced. She you could totally see that she she had the, you know, that capability of like understanding right away. But with me, I thought it would be nice to give her, to make her feel good, to make her feel you know, at ease in the environment. And I think we all did. I think in the end it was like a very, you know, familiar, nice environment, and that's the most important thing for actors, especially for first timers.
Absolutely. And then when did Saskia Reeves come into this process? Was she there before those guys were cast, or subsequently?
No, we were looking for the role of the mother, which is a very important role, yet not a huge role in terms of like, you know, days of work, etc., but very important. And I think at some point I started to think of, you know, actresses that I've seen before and that they were available also for the film at the time. And I remember I'd seen Saskia in the Butterfly Keys, and I'd remembered like that sweet face she had, and I thought like maybe like a sweet face would work for a tremendous mother or a horrible mother, and it's just like to twist it there, and then, you know, to hide it, and then, you know, and I think, you know, and then we got along very well. When she came, I went to London, I remember, to meet her, talk about the project, and then we you know, we slowly found the character. And to go back quickly to what so Jessie said before about, you know, the Alex being a guy or a girl, because I remember it was a guy and it could have been like a boy, the you know, what's now the sister. But then speaking also like, and thinking about it and speaking with my therapist, I remember I asked him like, but you see people that have this kind of like dystopic, you know, strange, and he said like, well, how would they imagine, you know, their alter egos, and so to speak. And he said like, but if they'd never seen a boy in their lives, they would probably tend to make someone similar to them. Then it could be also like masculine, can be more decisive, can be more strong, but then they would, and so I started to, you know, to think about it. Then I said, but why don't we have a girl instead?
That's brilliant. And
yeah.
Like, I think you've hit on something really interesting there about the mother as well, and that like a terrible mother or a brilliant mother. There's a really interesting kind of back and forth when I was watching it about like, is she kind of the monster of this piece, or is she genuinely like a really good mother, or somewhere in between them both? And I think Saskia's casting and her performance really do a great job on that.
See, no, they did, yeah. We also had fun. We had some improvisations. I remember we were like really rushing, like da 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 da. We didn't have, you know, we didn't shoot in like a huge amount of time, so we had to every day the schedule was stuffed. No, let's do it. And so, but then I wanted, you know, like the scene where they sing together. I remember we were writing the song the night before and then delivered the day after. I said like, okay, guys, we have like half hour. Let's put it in. Like, are you able? Okay, can you learn it? Can we try? Let's do one shot. I remember that shot for some weird reason. I did it. I know it's a total bullshit, but like it's a reminder. I remember like a Coca-Cola ad from, you know, there were like, you know, guys singing along with like, you know, candles in front of like a Christmas tree. It's like, okay, I don't know why, but let's do it. That starting with
don't
the candle.
Overthink it. Just go with your gut. I like it.
Yeah, no, but like really now I'm telling you, like it came out from that. It's like let's give it that vibe and try. And they did it, and they're laughing because they couldn't remember the words, but we kept it in the movie, and I think it gives like more, you know, humanity. I don't know.
That's fantastic. So that's your cast. You've got your cast there, and what a great cast it is. But I just want to talk a little bit about your crew as well. I mean, like obviously it's kind of a mixture of crew between like, you know, people from various different places, but like there's some great, I suppose, Irish crew on there, like James Mather was the DOP, I think, and Lee Stanton was costume. Jessie, maybe you could talk a little bit about filling out the crew and like how they all kind of came onto the project.
Yeah, I think that was, again, back to when the producers arrived first from Italy and kind of making sure they knew we would be able to, like, they would be able to meet the top people in Ireland. And obviously you can't get, there's so many wonderful people working in Ireland, but we got a really good team of people together, gave our opinion on who would really be, we felt would work really well with the team. And Louise was somebody who I'd worked with on Song of Granite, and I just thought did such an incredible job on like a low budget period film, shooting in the middle of nowhere. And I also, as kind of my company doing my first co-production, you want to feel really safe and secure with the people that you have around you too, that you're serving the film in the best possible way. So Louise was somebody that I think I felt was really going to be a good fit. And James was on board. Yeah, I think you guys hit it off really straight away, and that just worked. He was super passionate. He was a great champion for the film too. And of course, with somebody like that comes a brilliant team that they have around them, and it's always going to make production work in the best possible way. Joe Fallover needs a big shout out on this one as well, because he also was one of the people writing that song the night before it was being given to the cast, and himself, Natalie and Carlo came in proud as punch the next morning. We have a song. But he also, I think, did just the monstrous task of working in a space like that on a limited budget and making sure it seemed like you did not know where you were in the world, and that it was also believable that people lived in this way. I think he just did such an incredible job. And also I have to mention Jane, of course, because you asked about Jane earlier on, and Jane Doolin came on to because Jane lives some of the time in Sardinia as well. She's very tuned in with how the Italian system works. So she became kind of the exec that made all of that marry, you know, and really has a good relationship and reputation in Ireland too. So she kind of just, everything fit into place very nicely then.
Yeah, she made an Italian film, I think, La Cavadora.
La Cavadora, yeah, with Enrico, and yeah, we're trying to get his next one going too. Yeah, super cool. But yeah, Jane was fab, and since then myself and Jane have worked on anything we've worked on together. We've started an additional company together, so it really was I do think when Carlo says there's a really tight kind of familiar feel to the crew, there really was, and that kind of has to be that way in a sense, because you're working, your offices and your set are all in the one location, which is a dream in lots of ways, but you're all very kind of on top of one another. And yeah, and we had Catherine O'Flaherty was our line producer as well, who was fab, and her team were just brilliant. So I think we just hit gold with that, and that's what makes or breaks a good co-production in my opinion. Is
absolutely. And like you mentioned like the tightness of the team there as well, but you also mentioned that very special space you had to work with, and that Mr. Fullover did so well on, in that I've never seen a space like that in film. I can't think of it, oh, it's like the place in this, or it's like the place in that. It doesn't really compare. And Carlo, maybe you can tell me a little bit about finding your location, because as much as I hate the cliche of it's like another character in the film, like the hotel really is a huge part of it, and it is an amazing location, amazingly well dressed and shot. Can you tell me a little bit about finding that space?
Sure. Obviously, we were scouting for like a place. Again, the initial place for the initial location that was written in the script was a sort of a shack, I don't know, like a house in the woods. It wasn't like a hotel. Okay, it was like and I said, like, maybe that doesn't work. It's too much of a cliche, et cetera. And so we were starting to really like reshaping, first of all, in the writing process, the place, and we decided that it would have been in a hotel, and then we went around and we scouted for like a long time, and then all of a sudden I remember James, the cinematographer, said, like, guys, but if you think, this place in house, like up there, have you seen, like, I think it's like they want to sell it. It's a abandoned place. Obviously it's surrounded by like a golf court, but like we can sheet it anyway. So we went to, the interiors were fantastic, and like they were already like in pretty good shape to shoot the film. The problem was like how to make a hotel that's basically you next to the sea, make it feel like it's in the woods. But that luckily, like nowadays we have, some special effects, etc. So the other thing was to give the hotel, and then so with Joe, and then with a friend of mine who was an artist that I brought from Italy, we immediately started to give that 70s vibe, which is like a really like a place that it's believable, but really, is it believable? Like what? Like she's hanging in her room, like these drawings that are all made by my artist friend. For me, it was more like creating this space that it's a mental space, and then make it possible and believable. But it was the touch of it, and like using diegetic, like lights that were like not adding too many extra lights, but having the lights from the sets like they did in the 70s. We try to give that thing. And I have to say that with James, we really got along, and he did an amazing job for me. It was like without him, it would have been impossible. Like to that
and
extent.
I imagine it's quite a nice, not nice, but an interesting challenge for a DOP with the kind of whole dynamic of darkness and light you have going on in the film. Did he have to come up with a specific approach for dealing with that? Yeah.
So basically, yesterday I was watching First Cow, okay, the Kelly Reichardt movie, the new one. Obviously, it's a movie set, whatever, in the 19th century in America, in the middle of nowhere. And I always, you always think when you shoot films in the dark, how dark can you get? How dark can you be? Like if you need to put like extra fake lights on that, because I didn't want to, but it's impossible because it would be pitch black. So we're trying to find, obviously that's why they always have carrying this torches or these lamps with them to give them like a source of light between, but we try to keep to the bare minimum the extra diegetic lights to be, it's impossible not to use them. But yeah, and so we were mentioning like, obviously great cinematographers that did, you know, amazing jobs for other films. But like, anyways, that's the, and granted, like you also, like Jessie was saying, we have a limited budget, so we didn't have, the possibility to use whatever we wanted. We had like a specific amount of lights that we could use anyways. But I think we managed pretty okay.
You certainly did it. Like, it really is a terrific location. As James said, we can cheat it that it's meant to be in a forest, because watching it, I was like, where is this random hotel somewhere in the forest at Wicklow? I just assumed it was you found or built something amazing. Jessie, how was finding that location for you? Did that really kind of help things click into place, or?
Well, I think in the first instance you're going, there's no way we can afford to dress all of this place. There's no way we can afford to light it, because that's something that instantly, as soon as you see like a big space, once you light for night, you're just like, terrified of what's going to happen with your budget. But again, the team that just everybody worked together to come up with the best solutions, and slowly, once we had the confidence of James and Joe as well, that really helps a lot. So that place, then suddenly we started, calling it like the I think it was Daniele, the Italian line producer, started calling it the castle maybe, or the kingdom, the production kingdom, because we were able to do everything. And that's what made it really work, is having our offices there and then actually shooting, which I know is a real kind of boring aspect of it, but what you gain from being mostly in one place as well, and having that space there, in terms of your resources, allows you to kind of give a little bit more to the set dress, to the lighting.
It gives you time as well, I imagine, which is a very
that's key, and that's the best thing. It's like, how much time do we want to spend in vans and buses, and how much time do we want to spend shooting the thing, and it worked so well that we went back and shot the next film there. So like it kind of all just it did fall into place, and James, yeah, because he would have, that scene in Here the Young Men, the rave scene, is shot in that space too. So like the place has been used over and over again, because it's like having it's like having a studio, but you're an independent film with hardly any money, and you can make it work. So yeah, it was wonderful. It was really great. And not gonna lie, after wrapping the second film and driving down the avenue, I was kind of like, maybe I'll never have to go back there again, and that's okay. But no, we were really, really lucky. And then we moved to Wicklow area for the last week or so. I think we only had a week or two kind of exteriors, getting the forest stuff, because obviously you can't just, there's a very small bit of woods outside the back, that we did a good bit there. And then the quarry where she is actually exposed to light became just literally, actually we did a day unit move from the hotel, because in Ireland all you do is watch the weather every day, of course. And the minute we saw like the slight chance of sunshine, it was like, we're going there tomorrow, we have to change everything and move out there. But we got so lucky, because it just, the one day of the whole, like all I can remember about that shoot when we were outside, just being soaked, afraid all the Italians were going to dissolve or something in the rain. They didn't, thankfully. And yeah, so when we did that kind of really cool sort of, where she's so disorientated because she's fallen from this space and she's seeing light for the first time, we just, yeah, it was luck, pure luck.
And like, that's really interesting when you're talking about like the light and stuff as well, because I'm curious, like, Carlo, how you were working with the actors or the actresses on set, especially, like, I imagine that, like, you mentioned the use of diegetic light quite a bit, so I imagine it was a strange place for them as well when they're on set. It was almost always dark, I imagine. How did they like manage with that? Did it help them kind of get in character, or was it kind of strange for them?
Oh no, I think it helped them get in character. I remember like one scene that we were shooting in this corridor, and when she sees the mother, that it's acting a little odd, and she's thinking about the, she's in the cloakroom, she's thinking maybe she saw, and she discovered like the magazine, the porn magazine we were watching, etc. And then it was very dark, and it was like really, and she only had this little light, and I think it like, no, but that really helped. I think like especially Mia was embracing the atmosphere, whatever. Like I remember her putting like the earplugs on, earphones, and listen to certain tunes to get ready, because like if you're a trained actor, you know how to read certain emotions, even like by playing it. if it's the first time, I think you need to reach it the way you want. And then, so the environment and the music would help her really, you know, focusing and stuff. So I hope it helped. And it seemed like it did, you know.
It certainly did. It's a terrific performance, like from all three actors. But I remember, like, who is this actress? Why have I not heard of her? Is she Irish? I have to look her up. She was absolutely incredible, especially for her first feature. I feel they all were superb. Just talk a little. How long did you shoot for in total, Carlo?
What did we shoot? 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a lot for a very ambitious piece like this. And then, like, you shot this before COVID, obviously. Was any of your pre-production impacted by COVID, or post-production, excuse me, impacted by COVID, or had you that all?
No, but you know what, like post-production, yeah, it can be impacted by COVID, but it's fairly easy because you're editing something, just one person. And I remember, you know, yeah, we were working, but then the problem came later because I think we did everything fine, you know, we worked with masks, etc., throughout post-production. And then, you know, when the movie had to come out, I remember at least like the Italian release, we were supposed to come, you know, to be released on November 12th, and then they shut the, you know, all the movie theaters that week. And so that's it. But I mean, what can you do? I think it's the destiny of many films around the time. So we went on the platforms, and, you know, maybe even more people ended up watching it, I guess.
Oh, well, let's talk about that a little bit then. I mean, it's a lot of the films have been affected in different ways by COVID. Some of them had to shoot under restrictions, some had to do their posting restrictions. But I suppose you kind of hit at a time where it's like you're bringing it out, and the world has changed entirely in terms of distribution and getting it to people. And I know in Italy, like you said, you embraced the streaming platform and got to a lot of people. I know over here, I think Dating Amber had a similar thing where it possibly reached the right audiences because of, you know, going onto the streaming platforms during COVID. But Jessie, I'm just wondering if you could, like, as this was your first international co-production as well, if you could talk to me a little bit about, so was that process of getting it in front of people?
Yeah, and it's tough, you know, because exactly you're kind of breathing a sigh of relief, because at the time I was also trying to get into production on another film when we were in post on Shadows, and that was being impacted by COVID. And I was going, thank God, at least we've one done. And then you actually realize, which is still obviously a very present thing in our industry, is the big thing, is the reason you make the film is to reach an audience. And all you want, I think, a lot of the time is to like, you make a film for the cinema. Everything you do is catered to somebody sitting in a seat and having the world you've created all around them. So I think it becomes difficult because you have to embrace something very new, and you have to trust that your film is going to deliver in the same way. And I think with Shadows, it absolutely did. I think that the world that that especially Carlo, Joe, and James created allowed you to be immersed in that in that way. So I think it is about kind of embracing the digital aspect of it. Not that I would like to think that we're still going to continue to push theatrical cinema, but I do think there's a complete shift. And Shadows was kind of one of the first ones where, because it was the beginning of the pandemic, in a sense, like that was we got locked down on the February, we locked picture a couple of months later, and then it was kind of going out to the world. So the premiere was October, which was in person, which was just in that first gap. And then it was like digital. And I think even then we all sort of believed it was only going to be this one wave. So it was a little bit like shocking that we were being put back in this space, but also it was the first of many of those situations. And yeah, it was just about going, okay, well then how can you do make the best possible situation with that? And I think that Sky were involved. They did a good job. I mean, they have the resources to do it, so it was great. And thankfully in Italy, especially, people want to watch cinema. So I think you take it away from them, they'll find a way to watch it.
Absolutely. And Carlo, with that premiere that was in person, as Jessie mentioned, how did the audiences respond to the film?
So we did we did this premiere at the Rome Film Festival. Obviously that was like really during the pandemic, so with restrictions, we only were allowed like, I think half or even a third of the theater. So like you could, fill just a third of the theater for but no, they responded well. I think like even like those days, like from the journalist and from whatever press we had, for the festival, they responded well. I mean, especially the young audience. I remember having like a chat with, because I was curious to see like how kids would, respond to this kind of film, and they were really receptive and they were intrigued by the story and the fact, that yeah. I mean, it was a fun process, to be honest. Like not as much as it would have been or it could have been, but like fair enough,
I think you've made an interesting point there about many interesting points, Carlo, but like the young people, how they respond to it, I think is really interesting, because I do think it's a film that would definitely resonate with a younger audience than me, especially in a different way, in that it is about to an extent about this kind of environmental disaster, and it's a world I suppose they're kind of living in now, kind of every day as well. And like, what would I do in this kind of scenario? And it's great that the focus is on, these young people and how they react to that. Just have a question in here actually from Finn Cool. I don't think that's your real name, Finn, but thank you for your question. It says, love the film, saw it as part of the Galway Film Fla. Can you tell me about the music by Michelle Braga? It's really, really refreshing to hear something of that style. I assume that's like, if I remember correctly, that was kind of very strings oriented. I don't think there was any like electronic or anything on that. How did you come to the music, Carlo?
So again, I didn't want to use any electronic music and nothing, of that, and try to again stay in a more classic kind of world with an experimental touch. So what I tried to do with the composer Michele Braga is, and it was really like fun for him and really like even compelling, because it's complicated to compose this kind of music, because obviously you look at like masters like Penderecki or this kind of like world of experimental music from the early 20th century, but that's really the vibe I wanted to give, like this uncanny, weird, strange world. And and then we just like went there. It's we listened to references, and then it just like started composing, and then we went back and forth. We will listen and adjusting it. It was keeping it had to be material. I didn't want anything created by computer.
I think it works really, really well on that, and I'd forgotten about that when I was writing my question. So thank you, Finn, for that question. Jessie, for you, I have another question in here from Lisa Soon, S-O-O-N-E. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa's wondering, what did you learn on your first co-production on this project that you would have brought to other productions since, that you'd like to share with a young budding producer?
Yeah, it's a good one. Now, I will say that the first one was a couple of films before in terms of international co-production, but it was my first time being a minority co-producer, which I think is a really important differentiation, because it's a great thing to be able to do and experience, because it's can be a very sustainable form of producing when you're a part of something great, but you can still focus on your main projects and still give a lot of yourself to these other projects. And that's the beauty of kind of the European convention and its functionality. I think it's about giving yourself, first of all, making sure that you get on super well with your co-producers. I mean, you don't have to be best mates, but you have to be able to have conflict. You have to be able to share the vision for the film. You have to be able to also get on reasonably well. So I think that's important. You need to understand each other's boundaries in terms of what you can and can't bring to a project. And being very clear. Like, I was always very clear with the guys about, we got Screen Ireland funding, which was really, really great, but it's the most competitive fund. So when I'm being approached as a minority co-producer, I always tell people that it is really competitive, and that you can either take it that you can co-produce with Ireland, and you also can either have that and the tax credit, or just the tax credit, or if we don't get that funding, I'm totally fine if you need to go and find funding elsewhere. So it's just being really open and just being really certain of what you can bring and how much of yourself you give, because it is a really important one to just look at what you're giving of yourself and your company, and is that good for you in that time?
That's brilliant advice, Jessie. Thank you very much. We have another question in here from Barry Myler, and this is for Carlo. He said, Carlo, I saw the film at Galway and I loved it. Thank you so much. I'm currently studying in university in filmmaking, and I just wonder what advice you have for directing young actors, especially first-time actors. Would you have any advice in particular, I suppose, about dealing with younger actors as opposed to older actors? You mentioned earlier, talking a bit about Mia being her first time, she did a different process. How would you bring someone in to the fold and make them feel welcome in the cast if they're new to the experience, I suppose?
That's, I mean, I've been working mostly like, if I think about it, like the lead actresses of both the films I did are new to the, you know, to the screen or to acting. I mean, yes, they had done some drama lessons and as well maybe on Dina in the previous film. So what do you, I think like what we said before, you need to be with them, spend time and make them feel at ease, and just like give them time to find their emotions. And even if it takes a long time, I remember exactly in this film we worked, and I have to say that Mia had a very like easy way approach and access to her emotions, whilst for instance on Dina in my previous film had a harder time, so I had to give her space. And when like if we had to do like a complicated scene, a crying scene, we need to spend maybe like hours together. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to be accepting the odds of their acting, because obviously they can reach a certain level unless they're like, you know, geniuses or like hyper talented, like natural talents that can happen. And Mia is a little bit like that. I think can have, you know, can improve even more, but she has that talent. But other people, I think you need to accept their oddities, and sometimes like the fact that they can't really act properly give that natural aspect to the film. So because that natural feeling, either you have it by using someone that is not an actor, granted they can play only like a certain range of emotions, or to get natural again, you need to go the old spectrum. So you have like, you know, high masters of like acting, big actors that can go back to there after like, so that's what it is. And do try and work with them.
That's a very good answer, Carlo. Barry has a follow-up question here saying, you mentioned you wanted to see how young people responded to the film. Have older audiences who may have children of their own and younger audiences responded to the film differently?
Well, I mean, yeah, they have different references. Obviously, like older people would like, you know, catch maybe some of the quotes that say I had in the film. The young people did not, but they responded to different things. Maybe they responded more like to the emotions. They were more surprised by the fact that like they didn't know there was like a made up character by, you know, by like Alex. So yeah, people like older people are more aware of the references, or younger people less, but they enjoyed it or not enjoyed it for different you know, reasons.
I think that's really interesting, because I think the first time I watched it, I enjoyed it a certain way, and I enjoyed it a totally different way the second time I watched it, which I think is a sign of a really good film. I have another question here for you, Jessie. Is there anything you learned from any of the Italians on set, Carlo included, that you would bring to productions you do here in Ireland? Was there any particular moment that stood out to you?
Italians don't like rain. No, I mean, for sure. I think it's maybe not. I think with everything you do, you bring different attributes of your experiences with you, and you grow. I think something with co-production is understanding cultural differences of filmmaking, because we talk about the language of filmmaking in a different way than maybe the physical production side of it. People work in a very different way in different parts of the world. And I actually, even with the same company, went out to do a kind of hire job for them on a production in Norway. So you had like, yeah, again, Italian in Norway with UK and Irish. It changes the dynamic completely. So I think something that is really good to know is Italian and Irish work quite well together in lots of ways. I think it's about compromise and embracing each other's like I say differences, but it's a different way of doing the same thing quite well. And yeah, just like giving each other that space. I think what if I was to learn anything from the I do this a lot. I'm not gonna lie, I really do. It's like even my boyfriend's like, "Stop! You're doing it again. Stop!" I was like, oh, sitting on my hands. It doesn't help that Natalie's also Italian, but I think it is like, yeah, it was a really good combo, and I think that the amount that the way that the Italian producers work with directors is maybe like a slightly different space. Like they're really close, but not there all the time. I don't know if there's any kind of particular attribute that I would say that would come in. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's probably not the best answer, but I will say it's the cultural differences that you have to bring with you, and every little thing does kind of help when you're in a new situation and trying to adapt to a new, because hopefully you'll work with many different countries and
I actually think that's a great answer on what you said about the language of cinema being one thing, but language of production is a totally different one. I think that's really valuable for people to hear. We're nearly out of time, guys. I've just got one last question for you, Carlo. What would you like audiences to take away who may not have seen Shadows yet, that any people watching this or the recording of it would tell them, go watch Shadows? What would you like them to take away from it?
I hope they can really like enjoy the film for like the mix of the genre, understandable, easy access film, given like more like complex layers of reading it. So I really hope that the film can talk to like as a first vision, you appreciate the story, then you dig it's whatever I wish I can get from other films to get these different layers and to still think about the film after I've seen it. And I hope to some extent this film has that, and I hope people can appreciate that.
Absolutely, it certainly has rich layers that I think will stay with people. And like I watched it twice, like but months apart, like, and it was still needling away at me by the second time I watched it. So listen, very well done on that. Guys, we're out of time. Jessie, Fisk and Carlo Lavagna, thank you both so much for joining me to talk about Shadows. Guys, we're going to be back on Wednesday. We're going to be talking to some of the team behind Swan Song, including writer-director Ben Cleary, producer Rebecca Burke, and actress Naomi Harris. So please do keep an eye on IFTA.ie for more of these screen discussions. But for now, just a big thank you, grazie mille, to Carlo Lavagna, Jessie Fisk, and yeah, sorry about that attempt at Italian. Apologies.
Grazie a te, grazie a te.
Thanks, guys. It's been lovely to talk to you. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.